There are moments in your
beautiful.
life when you feel
So beautiful
an
that they
unexpected
become
hesitation.
traps.
You
A pause
replay the
before
moments
speaking.
when things were good.
A quiet check of the room.
When the relationship felt
a subtle
alive.
glance
When
towards
friendship
someone
felt
else's
close.
expression.
When the
To
opportunity
decide
felt
whether
certain.
your own
When
truth
life felt
is
hopeful.
acceptable.
You cling to the
External
emotional
validation
echo of the best
enters your
moments,
life this way.
not because they're
Not
bad,
loudly,
but because they're
not
gone.
dramatically.
But memory is
gently,
deceptive. Through
it
small
freezes
moments
people
where
in
you
their
stop
best versions.
trusting
It
yourself,
freezes situations
and begin
in their
relying on the
peak moments.
reactions around you.
And then you
suffer
wait for someone
because
to
the
prove
present
your
cannot
decisions.
compete with the past.
You wait for someone
This
to agree with your
attachment steals
feelings.
peace quietly.
You wait for reassurance.
You keep comparing
before
what is
believing
to
your
what
own
was.
instincts.
You keep
And
expecting
somewhere
today
in that waiting
to feel like yesterday.
your sense of self begins
You keep
to
trying to
shift.
revive seasons.
You start
that
measuring
ended long
your
ago.
day.
Not
Memory
by how
becomes
you
a
lived
prison
it,
when you keep
but
trying to
by how
reopen
others
doors you
responded
once
to it.
walked through.
Validation
Instead of
becomes a
walking
quiet
forward,
compass.
you aren't longing
An invisible
for the person.
force that
You're
influences
longing
your
for the
choices.
feelings.
A feeling
Your
that
confidence,
lives only in the
your
past.
expression,
5.
your emotional safety.
The pain of
You
carrying
don't notice it at
expectations that
first.
were never yours.
It feels
This
natural to
attachment
want to be
often
liked,
forms
to want to be
earliest.
understood.
It comes
to
from
want to be
childhood,
accepted.
from
But
family,
slowly,
from
your
culture,
life begins
from
revolving
society, from
around
invisible
subtle
pressures you
signals.
absorb without
A reaction,
consent.
be
A tone,
successful,
a
be
silence,
agreeable,
a lack
be
of
reliable,
approval.
be
That
perfect,
self-sacrifice, external validation, now you live inside this opens you don't want to disappoint. To see you don't want to break. That's the point. So material expectation next is guilty of silence and feels guilty of emotion. You feel guilty. You feel guilty of simply pain is attachment station. It doesn't break. Attached to wounds that
quiet
once
tensions,
protected you. Subtle
pain
doubts,
can become familiar.
brief emotional dips.
Familiarity becomes
that you
comfort.
learn to carry.
Comfort becomes
without questioning.
identity.
The
It
wound
begins
you
with
survive
tiny
becomes
moments
a
of
lens you
uncertainty.
perceive life through.
You share something
If you were
important,
abandoned
and the response
cling.
is softer than
If
you
you were
hoped,
criticized,
you
you
do
hide.
something meaningful.
If you were betrayed,
and no one
you
seems to
distrust.
notice.
If you were
speak
controlled,
your truth.
you seek
and
safety
silence
over
lingers
freedom.
longer than
If
comfort
you were
allows.
overlooked, you
These moments
overperform.
seem harmless.
These wounds
but
once
each
served
one
you.
leaves a
They
trace.
kept you safe.
A faint
They
message
helped
that
you understand
whispers,
the world.
Maybe
They
you're not
protected
enough.
your younger self.
You don't
when
believe it
needed
immediately.
protection.
You
But
simply
now
file
they
it
limit
away.
you.
Somewhere
Silent
deep
pain
in your
grows
emotional
from this
memory.
attachment.
Over time,
Because you keep responding
these
to the
small
present with
moments
strategies
accumulate.
created for the past.
You become more careful.
You are not
with your
living in your
words.
current life.
More cautious with your
You
feelings.
are living in an emotional
more
memory
dependent
that
on
no
feedback.
longer applies.
To decide whether
Pain
you're
becomes
allowed.
companion
To feel
only
confident,
when peace
proud,
feels
or at peace.
unfamiliar.
The pain
Silent
shows
pain is
itself
a signal,
in the hesitation
not
before
the
you
story.
act.
People
In the way you
often
check for
misunderstand
approval.
silent pain.
Before
They
trusting
think it
your
means
own
stay
thoughts.
strong.
In the way
They think it means endure.
criticism feels personal.
They think it means
even
be
when it
patient.
isn't meant to be.
But silent
in the way
pain is not
silence
endurance.
feels like rejection.
It is information.
Even when nothing has
It
gone
is your
wrong.
system whispering.
You begin
This is
shaping
not
yourself
working.
around what others
This is
expect.
too heavy.
Softening
This
your
is
edges,
costing too much.
shrinking your needs,
This attachment is
adjusting
draining
your
you.
expression. You don't
So
have to
you don't
collapse
risk
to admit
disapproval.
something is hurting
This
you.
is a silent
You don't
pain.
need a dramatic,
The
ending
slow
to choose
erosion
a
of
gentle
self-trust.
Silent
Not
pain
dramatic,
is the earliest warning
but
that
constant,
something inside you
not
is ready
visible,
to change.
but heavy.
And when pain
And
becomes
the deepest
quiet,
part of the pain,
clarity becomes
is this
possible.
quiet question that
You begin
follows
to see
you.
the cost of
Who
holding
am I
on.
when no one is watching?
You begin to recognize
next
the way
part,
to staying. We dive
you begin
deeper
to
question
into
the
the internal
stories you
mechanics,
built to
the
justify
hidden
your
reasons you
struggles.
learn to lean on
Silent
validation.
pain is not weakness.
Instead of yourself.
It is awakening.
External validation.
In the next part, we will go
controls your
deeper,
life,
not into the
because you want
psychological
approval,
patterns and
but
emotional
because at some
mechanics
point
that
in
make
your
these
past,
attachments so
approval
powerful,
became
so
the safest
convincing,
way to
and
exist.
so difficult
Patterns
to
like this don't form
because
randomly.
before you can let go,
They form
you have to
quietly.
understand why
In
you held
childhood
on in the first
moments
place.
when you learn
Deep analysis
that being
is the moment when your
accepted
pain
required
stops
being
being a
pleasing,
sensation,
that
and
being
becomes a
noticed
structure,
required achievement,
something you can
that
examine,
being loved
understand,
required becoming
and
smaller,
slowly dismantle.
softer,
Attachments
easier.
do not steal
You
your
learn
peace
to perform
randomly.
your way
They
into
steal
belonging
it systematically,
and performance
each one
became
has
a
its own
habit
architecture,
so natural,
its own emotional
that
engine,
you began to believe
its own
it was
logic
your
that silently
personality,
influences
but
your
beneath
decisions,
the behavior
shapes your
there are deeper
reactions,
mechanics
and
at work.
maintains your patterns
First,
without
there
requiring
is
your awareness.
emotional conditioning.
This part reveals
You
that
learned
architecture
early that approval
not to
brings
blame
relief,
you,
but to
relief
give you
from
vision,
tension, because
relief
clarity
from
is the
uncertainty,
only force strong
relief
enough
from
to
a
break
fear of
something
not
built
being
in the
enough.
dark.
Let's walk through the
became
deeper
emotional
mechanics of the
medicine,
6 attachments
brief,
that
quietly
addictive,
steal your
comforting.
peace. Second,
1. There is identity
attachment
confusion.
to people who no
When
longer
your
show up for
self-worth
you.
wasn't
This
reflected
attachment consistently
isn't really about the
you
person.
learn to look outward.
It's about the story you
not
build
inward.
around them.
To
You are
understand
attached
who
to
you
the meaning
are,
they once held.
your identity became
to the
a
identity
mirror
you had when
instead
they were in
of
your
a
life.
center.
To
the
the
hope
hurt
they
there's
represented,
fear
to the
of
emotional
disappointing,
version of yourself
fear
that
of
came
being
alive in their
misunderstood,
presence.
fear of
When
not
someone
living up
withdraws,
to expectations,
your heart doesn't
fear
chase the
that your
present version
true
of them.
self might not
It
be
chases the
chosen.
memory.
If
It
presented
chases
without
potential.
adjustment.
It
And
chases
finally,
emotional
there's
certainty
habit.
you felt before
You
things
practice
changed.
seeking validation
Psychologically,
for so long.
this attachment
that
is
it
fueled
feels
by
like instinct.
intermittent reward.
You don't
Their
ask,
affection wasn't
what do I
constant,
think?
which made
You
it
ask,
addictive.
What
The
will they
human
think
brain
of me?
becomes more loyal
The shift
to inconsistent
from
sources
inner
of
reference to
validation
outer reference
than steady ones.
is the quiet
identity
mechanism
investment. You
that
weren't
keeps
just
you depending
attached
on
to them.
approval.
You
to
were
feel
attached
grounded,
to the version of yourself
but
that
none of this
existed
is
with
permanent.
them.
Unfinished
Unfinished emotional
built through
sentences.
conditioning
When
can
someone
be
leaves
softened
without
through
closure,
awareness.
your mind
In the
keeps
next
trying to
part,
finish the
we
conversation
explore
that
the
never
hidden
happened.
layers beneath it all.
Hope as emotional
the roots
oxygen.
you rarely touch.
Hope feels safer than
but
grieving.
always feel.
So you unconsciously
Beneath every
choose hope,
search
even
for
when
external
reality says
validation,
otherwise. There are
You
older
think you're
layers
missing
in
the
the person,
experience.
but
What
quiet
you're
foundations
really
that
missing
were
is
built
the way you
long
felt
before
when
you
they
learned.
still chose you.
To name your
2.
emotions,
Attachment
your
to
needs,
outcomes you cannot control,
or your fears.
control.
These layers
is
don't
one of the
move
most
loudly.
misunderstood.
They shape you
emotional
from below
needs.
the surface. It isn't about
Guiding
power.
your reactions.
It's about
in
predictability.
ways you don't immediately
Your mind
recognize.
seeks predictability.
One of
because
these layers
unpredictability
is the emotional
once felt
atmosphere
dangerous.
of your childhood.
This attachment
Not the
forms when
events
you
you
confuse,
remember,
but the
effort with
feelings that
entitlement,
surrounded them. Desire
if
with
affection
destiny,
came
expectation
unpredictably,
with certainty.
you learn to
You build a
anticipate
plan.
others.
You
If
build a
praise
mental
arrived
timeline.
rarely,
You build
you learn to
emotional
chase it.
investments in an
If
outcome
criticism
that
was
hasn't
common,
occurred.
you
Sometimes
learn to
one
monitor
that was
yourself
never meant to
constantly.
occur.
This
Another layer
attachment
is the
creates
role you
silent
play to
anxiety,
survive. Because
maybe
your
you
peace
became
becomes
the
dependent
responsible
on
one,
the
the
behavior
quiet
of other
one,
people,
the
the
helpful
timing
one,
of external
the one
events.
who stayed agreeable.
Outcomes outside
So the room
your
stayed
influence.
calm.
Circumstances
Roles like these don't
you cannot
disappear.
force. They
Your
follow
mind
you into
begins living in the
adulthood,
future,
turning approval
constructing
into
currency.
scenarios.
There is
Calculating
also unmet
possibilities,
emotional need,
predicting
every
emotional
compliment
safety
that
based
felt
on
missing.
imagined results.
Every moment
The
you
logic
wish
behind
someone
this
noticed
attachment
you.
is simple.
Every silence.
If I
when
can
you needed
control what
reassurance.
happens, I can
Unmet
control
needs
how
don't
I feel.
die,
But
they
this is an
echo,
illusion,
and
as
outcomes are
adults,
never fully yours.
we search for voices.
Only your
to
actions
finally
are.
fill the spaces
And when you
left
attach your
empty.
emotional
And
stability,
then there is
to
inherited
something
fear.
you cannot control,
Fear of being too
you
much.
guarantee the loss of
Fear
peace.
of disappointing.
3.
Fear of being
Attachment
rejected
to
for
old
who
versions
you
of
are.
yourself.
Fear you didn't
This is
create.
one of the most hidden
Fear
attachments
you learn
because it disguises
These hidden
itself as
layers
consistency,
influence your present
responsibility,
far more than
and
any
even
single
character.
moment of validation.
But the truth is
They
quiet.
quietly convince you.
You are afraid to
that being
outgrow
yourself
who you
is
used to be,
risky because you
and
built
being
your identity
approved
on
is
the survival
necessary.
strategies.
But
that
once you
kept
see these
safe.
layers with clarity,
old versions
their
of you were
power
shaped
begins
by
to loosen.
environments
In the next
you no
part,
longer live in.
we walk into the
expectations that
the
no
quiet
longer
paths
apply.
of clarity,
Relationships that
return your
no
sense of
longer
self
exist.
back to your
Fears
own
that no
hands.
longer reflect
Clarity
your reality.
seldom arrives
Yet
with
the
force.
attachment remains.
It doesn't demand change.
Why? Because
It simply
every opens
identity,
a small door inside
even a
you,
limiting one,
a door that
provides
leads back to
predictability.
yourself. You
And
know
as
who you
step
are
through
inside it. The
you
grip
know
of
your
external
role.
validation.
You know the
begins
emotional
to
rules.
loosen.
Growth,
And subtle,
on the other hand,
almost imperceptible
requires
ways,
mystery.
The first path
requires
is
you to step into
self-recognition.
spaces where
You
you
start
don't yet recognize
noticing the
yourself.
moments.
So you unconsciously
shrink
cling to
yourself
versions that are too
to
small
avoid
because
disapproval.
smallness feels
The
familiar,
moments when you wait
and
for
familiar
praise
feels safe
before feeling
but the
proud.
safety is false.
The moments when
because
silence
staying
feels
loyal to
threatening.
old identities creates
Awareness
internal
doesn't solve the
conflict,
pattern. Your
but it
soul
breaks the
moving
trance.
forward while your
The
habits
second
pull you
path
back.
is returning to
Peace
your inner
cannot
signals.
exist inside
You
that
begin asking
contradiction.
quieter
For
questions.
what
Attachment
do I
to
want?
memories that keep
What
you
feels
stuck.
right for me?
Memory
If
is
no
not
one knew
just
about
recollection.
this,
It
would I
is
still choose
emotional architecture.
These questions
It becomes a
anchor you.
lens through which
They
you
turn your
interpret the present.
attention inward.
You stay attached
where
to
your
memories
real
when
compass lives.
They were the last
The
time
third
you felt
path
whole.
is practicing
They were the
small
last
boundaries,
time you felt chosen.
not dramatic ones.
They were the last
It's a
time
soft
life made
shift.
sense.
Taking a
They
pause
represent
before
an
responding.
identity you miss.
Sharing less
They
with
felt
people who
easier
drain
than the
you.
reality you face
Refusing
now.
to over-explain
But memory
your
is not
choices.
truth.
These
Memory is
micro-boundaries
preservation.
teach your nervous
It preserves moments
that
without
you do
showing
not
the
need
full
approval.
context to feel
It
safe.
captures the emotion.
The fourth
without
path
capturing
is
the
recalibrating
complexity.
your worth. You are not
Not
attached
through
to the past.
affirmations.
You
but
are
through a
attached to a
quiet,
simplified
inner
version of it
truth
that gives
your
you comfort
value
in your
doesn't
uncertainty.
increase.
This
When someone
attachment
praises
steals
you,
peace because the
nor
present never feels
does it
good enough when
disappear.
you keep measuring
When
it
someone
against a
remains
curated
silent,
version of yesterday.
worth is not
You aren't
performance.
longing for the past.
It is presence.
You are longing
And
for
the
the
final
emotional
path
certainty
is
the
soft
past
attachment.
gave you. The moment
And
you
certainty
realize
is not something the
you can
past
respect
owns.
others.
It is
Without
something you can build
surrendering
now,
yourself to their
but
opinions.
only once you stop
The
comparing.
moment you act from
5,
integrity.
attachment to
insecurity.
expectations that
The
aren't
moment
yours.
you allow people
Expectations
to
are
misunderstand
inherited
you
silently
without collapsing
from
internally.
culture.
From
Clarity
parents,
doesn't erase the
from
need for
partners,
validation.
from
It
environments
simply
that
makes it
conditioned
optional.
you to behave in
the
ways
final
that
part,
made others
we
comfortable.
close gently
These
with
expectations
a quiet
take 3
reminder
forms and a
One,
soft invitation
performance
to stay
expectations.
connected. Be
In the end,
responsible. Returning
be
to yourself
strong.
is not a
Be
loud
useful.
event. It
Be
is a quiet
productive.
shift. The
2,
moment you
emotional
finally
expectations.
that the
Don't
approval you were
complain.
chasing
Don't
was
need too
never the
much.
source of your worth.
Don't express
Only the
discomfort.
reflection of a wound.
Don't disappoint anyone
that want to be understood.
3,
You
identity
begin to see that your
expectations.
voice
Be
is
the
enough.
stable one.
Your pace
Be
is
the
enough.
fixer.
Your
Be the
truth is
peacekeeper.
enough.
Be
And
the
the world
dependable
does
one.
not need to applaud.
You didn't choose
for
these
you
roles.
to belong to your
They were
own
assigned
life.
to you.
Clarity
But you
doesn't
internalized
ask you
them
to
before
stop
you
caring.
had the awareness
It
to
simply
reject them.
asks you to care
So
for
now,
yourself first. As
to
an
let
adult,
your inner
you
compass
carry
lead.
a backpack of
Before
invisible
the world
obligations
has a
that
chance to
dictate how much
respond.
rest you allow.
To trust that
how
the
much
person
truth
you are
you speak.
becoming.
How much
no longer
authenticity you
needs
show.
permission to exist
How much
fully.
freedom you permit yourself.
Thank you for walking
This
through
attachment
this reflection
steals
with me.
peace because it
For your
replaces your
openness,
real desires with
your
a script
presence,
you never wrote.
your quiet honesty.
You're not failing.
If this
You're
voice speaks to
suffocating
you,
under
if
expectations
these words
that were
help you
never meant to
breathe
belong
a
to
little
you.
deeper.
Or
6,
see yourself a little
attachment
clearer.
to old wounds
You're welcome
that
to
once
stay
protected
close.
you.
Every
Like, comment,
wound
and
carries a
subscribe.
lesson. So
And
these calm
often,
truths
the
remain
lesson is
within
useful
reach
until
whenever
it
your
isn't.
soul needs
If
them.
someone